In Lamu, Kenya, a UNESCO cultural heritage site, local women farmers, environmental activists, and civil society organizations protested plans to construct a coal-fired power plant and went to court to halt the project. The construction was halted following a court ruling, which came after many years of struggle. The cultural heritage of Lamu was protected.
It's a big day for Kenya, it's a big day for Africa, and it's a big day for the world.
We're here for our neighbors. We're standing for each other.
In Glasgow, Scotland, when the police raided a house and put 2 migrants in a van to deport them, they were met with backlash from the residents of the neighborhood. A crowd of protesters surrounding the van, and one person lied under the van to stop it from driving away. Following protests staged by Glaswegians and the neighborhood residents, who were united against discriminatory policies toward immigrants, the deportation procedures against the 2 migrants were suspended. In Istanbul, following the appointment of a trustee by the President of the Republic as a rector of Istanbul's Boğaziçi University, students, academics, and graduates called for the university rector to step down in defense of the principles of the university and academic and administrative autonomy. When their call went unheeded, they then proceeded to stage peaceful protests to draw attention to the 2 faculties established overnight in contravention of the laws, and how these developments and impositions damaged the life at the university. The trustee rector was dismissed through a presidential decree, after which his deputy took over the role of rector. Students, academics, and graduates are continuing to call for democratic elections to be held to determine the next rector.
Hiç utanmanız yok mu? Hiç mi utanmıyorsunuz?
In Myanmar, the army, not happy with the election results, took over the administration on the pretext that the election had been rigged. Many politicians were detained and a state of emergency was declared. Following the military coup, despite armed intervention and the detention of thousands of individuals, the people continued to protest in large numbers and did not abandon their call for democracy. In Antep, Kırkayak Culture, Arts and Nature Association is continuing to fight prejudice and discrimination against migrants, refugees, and other disadvantaged groups within the community through artistic activities. By the way of the film festivals, exhibitions, and plays it organizes, the association promotes solidarity, engagement, and diversity. In the United States of America, following Donald Trump's discriminatory rhetoric against Asians in the context of the coronavirus pandemic, hate speech and attacks against Asians are on the rise.
That America, they're America. Why they hate you run deep in America? Why they want to kill me in America? Is it me or is it because they scared of us? Said America.
The Stop Asian Hate protests, which began following an armed attack targeting 8 people, including 6 Asians, had repercussions all around the world.
Dün biz bunları buraya koymadık. Bırakmayacağız. Direnene kadar, biz bezene kadar siz bezeceksiniz, biz bezmeyeceğiz. Biz buraya hayır diyeceğiz.
In Rize, the local population, primarily women and environmental activists, launched protests against plans to construct a quarry on the coast.
Biz onlarla buraya böyle savaş edeceğiz.
The protesters aim to draw attention to the destructive force of the construction and the quarry on the natural habitat and wildlife. They are continuing to resist despite the crackdown.
Biz malımıza taş ocağı yapılmasını istemiyoruz. Bu kadar basit.
In India, a group of women from the Dalit class who are considered to be apart from and below the caste system set up a news agency that is entirely staffed by women. The agency creates news reports about incidents of gender-based violence, as well as the problems, injustices, and the pressure witnessed in a wide range of areas, from national government to the position of women in the household. In Belarus, people took to the streets following the re-election of Alexander Lukashenko in 2020 after 27 years in power. Staging mass protests, they called for fair and equitable elections.
Помню себя в подростковом пальто. Мы шалопутными были мальцами, но подлецами не был никто. Где учились быть подлецами?
An unjust tax reform introduced in Colombia against the backdrop of deepening poverty sparked mass protests, including those organized by trade unions. In Russia, many cities, including the capital Moscow, saw large protests following the detention of the opposition leader Navalny. In all these protests, which took place in different cities, large groups of protesters called for democracy, efforts to fight corruption, justice, and human rights. They did not yield even after law enforcement responded with a violent crackdown and hundreds were detained. Following Poland's and Turkey's decision to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention and Hungary's announcement that it will not ratify the convention, the streets were filled with protests from women's rights and LGBTI+ groups.
Nem tetszik, hogy egyre szarabbul érzem magamat a hazámban. Nem tetszik, hogy a haverok, a rokonok nem sokára diszidálnak.
Governments may have abandoned the convention, yet large groups are expressing on every occasion their resolve to continue the struggle in defense of gender equality and against all forms of violence and patriarchy.
Nem tetszik, hogy a diplomát egyre inkább szart sem ér. Nem tetszik, hogy mind a hét nap szomorú, nem csak a vasárnap. Nem tetszik, hogy a nevemben hülyeséget csinálnak.
In 2021, large fires broke out and lasted for days in many places around the world, from northern and southern America to Russia, southern Europe, Africa, and Australia. The wildfires also ravaged Turkey's Aegean and Mediterranean coasts. Thousands joined hands in volunteering to help all living beings that once inhabited the forests destroyed by the fires, as well as the people who had to leave their homes. As we witness the striking consequences of the global climate crisis, we are calling for urgent measures to be introduced around the world.